everyone, welcome back to my channel. Humbert will be joining us today apparently, which is really cute. That's why you're getting a different angle of my couch. So today I'd like to make a quick video about 5 tips that I have based on my struggles and experience to make your reading life a little bit easier and to make reading a little bit less intimidating, because I think a lot of people kind of view reading as a sort of assignment, or sometimes they have so much ambition and want to accomplish so many things and read so many books that they build it up in their heads to the point where they kind of go into freeze mode and just kind of avoid it altogether or procrastinate around it and then feel bad about it, and it's just this whole mess in your head. I know I've fallen into this trap so many times, and I've kind of teased it out in such a way that it's no longer that big of a monster in my head. So I'm going to give you 5 tips that have helped me in certain circumstances, and some of these have been answers I've given in comments before because people have brought it up in different forms. So if you recognize some of these, thank you for inspiring this video. So the first tip is actually kind of a fun one. So this is bookmarks that will save your life, basically. Do you sometimes read either a non-fiction book or a fiction book where there's terminology that's back and forth, time hopping, different labels, or something that it's too much to kind of sort it all out or keep track of it, and you kind of just mentally have it all in a blur in your head, like it's a big ball of nothing, and you're going through this book and it's just so confusing because you forgot where you're at. So this is where I always create a bookmark out of a diagram or something that has to do with the issue at hand. When I'm reading about dinosaurs, for example, one of the things I struggle with is all of the prehistoric eras. Some dinosaurs are so far apart that they're actually closer to humans than they are to the other dinosaurs. I would read a dinosaur book, non-fiction, and then the author would kind of make references to the Jurassic period and the Cretaceous period, all of the things. And in my head, it was just a jumble. I didn't understand which one came first, how would I group them? So I found the diagram I was happy with. That was cute, it was simple, but it also had the visual of the different eras. I printed this out, right? And I laminated it. You don't have to, of course. You could just glue it onto a cardboard or something and use it as a bookmark for any dinosaur book that you read. Now, I have a big dinosaur reading project going on, so for me, it's gonna be useful for many books. Other time I've used this is with a map. So I know a lot of fantasy novels use maps extensively at the beginning, and I got really tired of flipping back and forth and losing my page or not knowing where I am as I'm reading. So I printed out the map and I used it as a full-on bookmark that was probably just as big as the page. And the third time I've used one, and this was super useful, I was reading The Warden by Trollope, and there were so many terms in that book that were referring to the church, but it was a very particular time in history where a lot of positions and roles that were paid or supported by the church were, you know, very dominant at the time, that don't even exist anymore, or, you know, I wouldn't understand what their function was. Like, I have read so many titles in that book. In the first few chapters, I had encountered so many characters with titles and labels that I didn't understand what each job did and how it served in the church and what its hierarchy was. So I made myself a bookmark with kind of a little bit of a definition and a little bit of a ranking. So I put them in the order where, like, you have the, you know, archbishop or deacon at the top, or work your way down. So it just worked out that way, so that every time I was reading, when a new character would come up or a job was being listed, I would understand where this person fit in terms of class or ranking, and how the other characters would look upon this character in terms of seniority in a time when this stuff actually mattered to people. I took the effort to make that bookmark because I was intending to read the rest of the series by Trollope, and I did buy the second book, I just never got around to it. So I think I'm gonna just have to start over when I decide to sit down with that series again. If you're reading something with time periods or something, just use that bookmark as a guide to help you kind of find this less intimidating and sort things out so that the rest of the reading goes by smoothly. And now you have it in the form of a bookmark instead of Googling everything all the time or doing research or flipping to the front of the book. Number 2 ties a little bit back to making this an assignment in your head. And this is a trick that I've used for assignments in school as well. I do not measure pages or progress on the reading. Instead, I measure my reading experience in time. Time is the most efficient way to actually get things done and to know that you've spent quality time reading. So sometimes you might be reading a more difficult text and maybe you'll only get through one page in half an hour because you've had to read some sentences twice, you've had to look some stuff up, maybe you had to give it some thought, jot down some notes, and you plodded through and it took a while, but it was quality work and it was a good half an hour. And sometimes you might be reading a light book and you can get through 30 pages or 60 pages, right? And it also breaks things down in manageable chunks. If you have, for example, a Jane Austen novel or something, or a classic that you find a little bit intimidating, and you look at the whole thing from afar and you're like, ooh, I don't know if I'm gonna get through that. Just look up on Audible how many hours an audiobook is of that book. And usually you'll find that it's 7 hours or 12. And then it's not that bad because that's 1 hour a day. That's a week. You can get a classic done in a week. There are so many classics you can probably read in a day or a weekend, but there are many more that can be accomplished in a week or two if you dedicate an hour a day to reading. I like to follow along in the text with the audio because I need audio and visual at the same time. So for me, it's almost like a guide that keeps me going because if I measure it in time, it's more manageable. Now, the third one is people tend to overthink reading time or fantasize about it or over romanticize it. And I've done this so many times because reading is beautiful. When you look at somebody reading, they look beautiful. And I'm not the only one who thinks this. There are so many Instagram accounts of just beautiful girls in beautiful dresses reading, and it's so beautiful and aesthetic. And there are paintings from antiquity to now of people just pleasantly reading at the park or in a window. It looks beautiful, right? And I think because we have these images in our head of a beautiful person reading in an aesthetically pleasing cozy corner or like a Pinterest type of cozy reading nook, that we think, oh well, I have to wait for the perfect time for my house or my apartment or my dorm to look a very particular aesthetic way, to have the right pillows and the right purple reading chair and the right lighting. And you start to build up what life should look like for you to start reading. If you're gonna do that, then you're gonna keep pushing it away, thinking that it has to look a certain way before you can start reading. So do not overly romanticize the idea of reading, because reading can be both escapism, it could be learning for the purposes of like learning facts, it could be anything. So you have to fit it around your actual real life. Now, realistically, most people go to work. A lot of people do commute. So if you commute on the subway or on the bus for like 20 minutes, let's say, 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back, that's 40 minutes of reading. You add 20 more minutes at home, you're at the 1 hour, which we just discussed. You can get done one classic in a week if you do an hour a day, right? Sandwich it between your daily life as you see it, where it could fit, and don't over romanticize it. Just think 20 minutes, I got this, I could do this. You can also tie, especially like nonfiction, to predetermined habits. So I've made a video recently called micro learning books. So this is where you habit stack and you have some books that are very short, and then you can just tie it into the time when you take a bath or the time when you have your morning coffee or something that you already do throughout the day, so it's not so intimidating. Try to have a realistic outlook on your actual life and assess it and see where it fits, because it will fit. Number 4 is to spread out your formats if you are able to in different situations. So for me, nonfiction, when I hear nonfiction, because it's mostly facts, I don't have to fixate on the beauty of the language or the formatting or kind of the layers of world building. It reads to me almost like a podcast, especially sometimes when the author reads it themselves, and it just flows. It's almost like one person monologuing, similar to a YouTube video or something, right? So I will often take a walk outside and listen to the audiobook of nonfiction books. I can't do that with fiction. I need a pen in hand. I annotate books. So I need to only listen to nonfiction because it's fun facts, it's a conversation, so it works. But if you're trapped in a lot of places, for example, like let's say you get stuck in waiting rooms a lot, or parts of your job, let's say you're working on computers and then you have to run diagnostics on computers and then you have to wait for 45 minutes for your computers to do something while you wait, and you have to wait, there's nothing you can do, it's kind of dead time, then you can use like a Kindle app or your actual Kindle or something to work in that in-between time. Like, make use of dead time instead of pulling out your phone, to use just a different format of reading if you really want to get this done in times where you might otherwise not be able to find. And you do not have to sacrifice, fun time, family time, whatever time, because you've integrated it into your dead time. Thing where I like to listen to children's books that I've read before bedtime, because I don't care if I doze off in the middle of the audio, because I've read it before, it's familiar to me, and I could just fall asleep. And I cannot read in bed. I fall asleep almost immediately. Like, as soon as my head touches the pillow, I'm out. So usually I just kind of set the timer for 15 minutes, and I can never even remember that much. So I'll put like Winnie the Pooh or I don't know, The Secret Garden or something in the background, and it will just put me right to sleep. So that's, I don't know, I wouldn't count that, but it's just an example of a different format and a different content in different spaces. And the fifth one is so important. Do not, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, do not compare yourself to others, because you do not know other people's situations. And I'm going to give you examples. So I used to watch some booktubers who I admired very much for their reading ethic and their work ethic and the kinds of videos they would make and how thoughtful they were about what they were reading. And then I met these people, and when I did, I was surprised to find out that, for example, they did not have a job, right? They did not have a daily job. Some people lived with their parents and had a lot of free time. Some people worked from home the entire time, and this was before COVID, so it was kind of before this was normalized for other people to occasionally work from home. It was kind of, built into their lives that they could listen to audiobooks while they worked from home on their computer, and they could get a lot of things done that way. And I was just shocked, because in my head, they had the same lifestyle as me. It's just they were more efficient and they got more reading done because they were more disciplined. And it was kind of illuminating to find that out, And for me, for example, when I returned to BookTube this summer, my first two videos were about Inuit literature and falling in love with an artist, Maud Lewis. Now, before that, I had not been on BookTube for over a year, sort of. And I had many, many months where I just couldn't read. I was blocked. I was just not in a mental space to read at all. So I didn't for like 8 months. And then when I started reading again, for maybe 4 or 5 months, I read only Inuit literature and then about Maud Lewis. So when you saw two videos that were maybe, half an hour each or less, if you see them back to back, if you see them, on your feed, you think, wow, like this person's just read all these books all at once just now. But the reality is that I've chipped away at those books for 5 months, and it's something I had been working on my own, not even knowing that I'd returned to BookTube. And I had a long time before that where I didn't read anything at all. So it's very intimidating if you have a feed that looks a lot like mine, because if you follow me, the likelihood is that you are also following many other booktubers. So if you see on your feed so many people reading constantly, whether it's that they review one book or short story or 10 books, and they're also writing and they're also doing so many other things, it can come as a like feeling of, oh, I'm not as good or as disciplined or as, you know, able to do those things. But you don't really know what the timing is on that, when they've actually read those things, if it has been just now or last month or 3 months ago. There's a lot you don't really know that goes on in the background, or what people's situation is in terms of work. So always keep that in mind, because that makes you focus on your own reading, on your own reflective thoughts about your own books that you're dealing with, and just stick to that. Like, don't compare yourself with other people, because then everything becomes overwhelming. The moment you start comparing, everything's overwhelming. I hope this was useful to at least one person out there. And if you have any more things that you find overwhelming, or if you have any more questions or any more tips for other people, feel free to leave them down below. So on that note, I will go now, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!